In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun.
There is something comforting about the way the universe moves, not with violence, not with urgency, but with an ancient calm. It expands, not like an explosion racing outward, but like a slow breath drawn in the dark. Soft, continuous, and wide. You are used to motion that has direction. A ball rolls, a bird flies, a river runs. But the cosmos does not travel through space the way you understand it. Instead, space itself grows quietly, like mist unfolding across a valley. It stretches between galaxies, not carrying them forward, but creating new distances. They do not fly apart. The very fabric beneath them extends. The galaxies are not projectiles, they are passengers. Their journey is passive, like paper boats adrift on a pond that is gently rising. They do not speed through space. Space rises between them. You are not watching movement. You are watching space become. It is a strange idea, almost unsettling in its stillness. You might picture galaxies like stars on an inflating balloon, not moving on their own, but growing farther apart because the surface beneath them grows. No central point, no explosion from a center. Just everything drifting away from everything else, evenly, silently, constantly. This idea that space itself expands is one of the most tender truths in cosmology. It means that the distances between things are not always fixed. That separation can grow even without motion. That the night sky is a living fabric, not a static stage. You might think of the Big Bang, as something that shattered silence, with sound and flame. But it was not a bang in the way your senses might expect. There was no blast, no fiery noise, just the beginning of time itself, and with it, the beginning of space. And from that infinitesimal seed, space has never stopped unfolding. There is no edge to this breath, no barrier where the universe ends. It grows into itself, a balloon with no skin, a canvas with no border. Wherever you look, space is stretching. And that means every point is receding from every other. Not because they choose to move, but because the ground beneath them lengthens. You see galaxies now, each one ancient and alone, floating in this expansion. Billions of stars bundled together, sailing through time like scattered embers. And yet, they are not sailing through a void. They are resting within it. And the void is breathing. The farther away a galaxy is, the faster it appears to recede. This is not a trick of light. It is a law written in redshift. The way light stretches as the space it travels through stretches with it, like a wave. On an ocean that is itself rising, the light becomes longer, colder, older. The stars do not dim from exhaustion. They dim from distance. You begin to feel the shape of this truth, that the night sky is not fixed, that the stars you see tonight are not where they were and not where they are. Their light began its journey long ago, carried across a space that grew behind it. This understanding is not loud. It does not crash into you. It settles gently, like snowfall on an open hand. It tells you that the universe is not a place of stasis. It is not resting. It is becoming, constantly, endlessly, invisibly. You lie back in the stillness of thought, and you wonder how such a breath began. How did space know how to stretch? Was it told? Was it built to do so? Or is this expansion simply what happens when time begins? There are theories, of course. Inflation, the idea that the universe, in its earliest moment, expanded faster than light for a flicker of an instant. Not through space, but of space. A swelling so fast it defies language. And then, like the settling of a tide, that chaos cooled. Matter formed, light was freed. Galaxies began to emerge from the haze, like islands from a fog. And the breath continued. Slower now, but steady. You might think it would stop, that gravity would pull it back, that the breath would end with an exhale and a collapse. But that is not what you see. The expansion did not slow. In fact, something stranger happened, but that comes later. For now, you rest with this truth, that space itself is not a backdrop, but a participant. It moves, it grows, it changes, and in that quiet expansion, you are carried. You, too, are part of the fabric. Every atom in your body has ridden this stretching canvas since the beginning. You are made not only of matter, but of motion, slow, persistent, cosmic motion. You feel small, but not insignificant. You feel distant, but not alone. You feel the gentle breath beneath all things. And in that breath, a question: what makes space grow? Some say dark energy, some say geometry, some say we do not yet know. But whatever the cause, you are here, within the breath, held softly in a universe that is still unfolding. And so you float, not through the stars, but with them. Light leaves. That's what it does. It departs. Softly, swiftly, without hesitation. It spills out from stars, from galaxies, from the very edges of time. And though it travels impossibly fast, it still takes its time to reach you. When you look into the night sky, you do not see the stars as they are. You see the light that left them long ago. Some of that light has been traveling for millions, even billions of years. A slow flight across a universe that keeps changing beneath it. You are not just seeing distance, you are seeing age. You are seeing the past, stretched thin across the cosmos. And the farther away you look, the older the light becomes, until you are staring not just across space, but deep into time. But something curious happens to that ancient light. It arrives different, not broken, not scattered, but stretched, pulled, lengthened like a wave drawn slowly out. What was once bright and blue becomes dim and red. This is called redshift, not a name to memorize, but a feeling to understand. Light loses its sharpness, not because it is tired, but because the space it travels through expands beneath it. The path grows longer, even as the light is already on it. It is not the light that slows. It is the space that stretches. You follow this trail of stretched light through the sky, to galaxies far beyond your own, and you notice something strange. The farther they are, the faster they seem to move away. The more red their light becomes, like footprints fading in sand, growing fainter with distance. This was the discovery of Edwin Hubble, a pattern so simple it hums like a lullaby. Distance and speed are woven together. Galaxies far from you are not just far, they are fleeing. But are they really running? Is motion the truth here, or is it illusion? Are galaxies rushing outward like frightened birds, or is the fabric beneath them expanding, gently lifting them apart like petals drifting on a rising tide? You start to see the difference. If galaxies were truly moving, you might expect some anchor point, a center, a source. But the universe offers no such place. Everywhere you look, everything is moving away from everything else. It is not a crowd scattering, it is a web stretching. And so you let go of the idea of motion through space, and begin to accept motion. Of space, it is strange how the simplest light, a beam from a faraway star, can carry such profound clues. Starlight becomes a message, and its red color is not just beauty, it is a whisper of truth. You begin to listen more closely. Galaxies that are nearby show only a soft red shift. They are slipping away slowly, but galaxies farther out, their light is deeply red, faded into long wavelengths. They flee faster than you expect. Too fast. This isn't a gentle drift. It's an acceleration. Something is not just keeping the universe moving, it is making it move faster. Faster still, with every passing moment. You would expect gravity to slow the universe down, to pull things back, to hold space like a thread. But the opposite is true. The farther you look, the faster the stars seem to disappear, as if some unseen force is widening the gaps. But the light says more than just speed. It says something about the nature of time itself. The redder the light, the older it is, and in that color you can read history, a timeline not written in books, but in wavelengths. It is humbling to realize that the laws of the cosmos are etched into the very light you see, that each photon, each particle of light is a time traveler, bearing news from a past that no longer exists. You start to wonder what those galaxies look like now. Are they still there? Have they changed? Has their light already fled beyond your reach? You will never know. Their present is hidden. You are always catching up to their past. In a way, this is comforting. It means the universe is always offering you stories, always letting you read back in time, to witness things as they were, to understand things that no longer are. But with that wonder comes a quiet ache, because the farther the galaxy, the more the space between you grows. Some galaxies will eventually drift so far, their light will never reach you again. They will disappear, not into distance, but into darkness. And still, the light keeps coming. It stretches, it flees, it tells you that space does not hold still. It grows like breath. It carries the stars farther from one another, and farther from you. You wonder what it means to live in a universe where light cannot catch up, where the past is always visible, but the present keeps slipping away. You wonder if the galaxies know they are fleeing, if they sense the stretching, or if they simply shine, unaware of the space swelling around them. You wonder how long it will last, this stretching, this fleeing, this fading of light. Will there come a time when the sky grows empty and all the red has faded into black? But you do not panic. The universe is not cruel, it is only quiet. It does not rush, but it does not stop. It expands because that is what it does. And light stretches because space grows. In this gentle pull, you see not chaos, but rhythm. In this fleeing light, you hear not a scream, but a sigh. You've always known gravity as a pull. Quiet, steady, reliable. It holds your feet to the earth. It gathers water into oceans. It binds the moon to its path, and you to the stars above. Gravity clings to everything, even light, even time, even you. It is the soft glue of the cosmos, never shouting, never seen, but always there. So when you hear that the universe is expanding, you expect gravity to resist, to slow things down, to gather scattered pieces, to try, at the very least, to keep everything close. And for a time, it does. In the early universe, gravity pulls at the edges, tugging gently against the spread, like fingers curling around a thread, trying not to let go. But then something changes. The universe does not slow. It accelerates. Not all at once, not like a leap, more like a drift becoming a glide becoming a push that never stops. Galaxies begin to drift apart, faster and faster, as if gravity's grip has loosened, as if the glue itself has thinned, not from exhaustion, but from being overcome. It's not what you expect. You imagine the cosmos like a ball tossed upward, rising, yes, but eventually falling back. That's what gravity does. It calls things home, but this ball doesn't fall. It speeds up, as if someone or something is still pushing. You pause at that thought. What could overpower gravity? What invisible hand could open the universe, gently but relentlessly? Scientists call it dark energy, but the name is only a whisper, a placeholder. No one knows what it is, only that it acts like a pressure, not of matter, but of space itself. It's as if the fabric of the universe doesn't just stretch, it wants to stretch, as if space has become hungry for distance. You think of a rubber sheet, one that pulls itself wider, not because something yanks it, but because it's made to grow. A silent urge beneath the stars, and gravity. Gravity lets go, not in defeat, but in surrender, because it cannot win against this quiet, persistent pressure. It can only slow the separation for a while, before it's left behind entirely. You see it in the way galaxies leave each other, in the way the night sky darkens over time, not because the stars go out, but because they flee too far to be seen. Gravity does not chase them. It stays behind, watching, waiting, unable to hold on. You wonder if this has always been the fate of everything, to drift, to separate, to be carried by a force that does not pull, but pushes. It's unsettling, this idea, that the force you've trusted most, the one that holds planets and people and dreams in place, can be overwhelmed by something invisible. But there is beauty in it too, because it means the universe is not just coasting through time, it's evolving, it's alive in its own expansive way. You think back to that moment, billions of years ago, when gravity began to fade from control, when the expansion began to speed up, not because something pushed it, but because something let it. What changed? What shifted in the balance? Some say a hidden energy emerged. Some say the vacuum itself carries a pressure. Some say the equations simply reveal what we cannot see. But you don't need answers right now. You only need to feel the rhythm. The universe is not falling apart. It is stretching with purpose, with grace. Gravity still exists. It still shapes stars, binds galaxies, and curves space. But its reign is no longer total. It has become a memory of what once held the cosmos close, before the great letting go. And now you drift in a universe that grows not by pull, but by release, not by clinging, but by opening, and that opening never stops. It continues with every breath of time. There is a comfort in names. You give shape to mystery by speaking it softly, and for a moment the undefined becomes less wild. When the universe began to accelerate, when distant galaxies parted faster than your expectations allowed, there had to be something to blame. So a word was chosen, a quiet label stitched to the widening fabric. Dark energy. Not dark like shadow, not energy like lightning in your hands, but a placeholder, a careful tag tied to an effect before the cause is known. You sit with the name and feel how provisional it is, a sign on a door that has not yet been opened. It says only this: something makes space push outward, something acts everywhere at once. not stronger here and weaker there, not trapped in bottles or magnets or stones, but woven into the emptiness between all things. It does not shove like a gust. It presses like atmosphere, steady and serene, turning distance itself into a slow tide. You do not touch this pressure with your fingers. You come to it by listening to light. Some stars die in a way that glows, with a nearly predictable brightness, like a standard candle in a quiet room. When those stellar candles detonate far away, their true brilliance is known, and their apparent dimness tells you how far they are. Their color, stretched toward red, whispers how quickly space has grown since the light left. Put many such beacons on your map and a pattern appears. The universe is speeding up, as if distance itself has learned to quicken. But naming is not knowing. When you say dark energy, you admit to things at once, that there is an outward push, and that you do not yet understand its source. Perhaps the emptiness of space carries a built-in pressure, a simple, unchanging presence that belongs to the fabric itself. Perhaps there is a field, an ocean you cannot see, whose level rises and falls over time, gently altering the pace of the cosmic breath. Perhaps the geometry of spacetime, the rules in the fabric itself, needs a slight revision on the grandest scales. A small tilt only the widest stage reveals. You test these possibilities with patience. You look not only at dying stars, but at the faint ripples frozen into the early afterglow of the universe, the almost uniform light that pervades the sky. Tiny variations in that glow are like the grain of wood that reveals how a tree once grew. Those patterns describe a young cosmos, and when you compare them with the present, you sense how the expansion has changed. You also trace the way galaxy clusters spread apart, finding in their spacing a quiet ruler for growth, a way to measure how fast the fabric has lengthened since those structures were young. What kind of push is it? Gravity pulls on everything, with mass, and even on light that has no rest mass at all, bending paths with a patient hand. The new influence, whatever it is, acts differently. It does not pull objects together. It stretches the stage beneath them. It does not fade in vast, empty regions. It seems strongest precisely where other things are absent, because absence is its home. When space grows, more room appears for the pressure to be itself. And so the growth feeds on growth, a feedback that makes the emptiest places the most persuasive of all. You might wonder if this is just a misreading, some mistake in the lenses you use, or a trick of dust, or an assumption hidden in the arithmetic. Science keeps that worry close. Measurements are checked, and other methods are invited to disagree. The result, again and again, is a soft consensus. The acceleration is not an illusion born of impatience. It is a property of the universe itself, and yet the word dark refuses to brighten. Part of the mystery lies in how wildly theory can overshoot. If you add up the restless flicker that quantum physics says should live in empty space, you get a number for the push that is absurdly huge, a prediction so extravagant it would have torn the cosmos apart long ago. But the actual push is gentle, almost shy. Between the theory's roar and the universe's whisper lies a canyon of not knowing. So you return to metaphors that fit inside the mind. Think of space as bread rising. Yeast makes pockets of dough swell. Distance grows everywhere at once, and raisins move apart without walking. Now imagine the yeast is not a separate ingredient at all, but a property of the dough itself, always. There, expressing itself more whenever there is more dough to express through. That picture resembles a constant pressure of emptiness, a steady background urge to widen. But pictures can change. Maybe the yeast ebbs and flows. Maybe the outward push slows in some eras and quickens in others, the way a long breath sometimes deepens, sometimes shallows. In that story, the pressure comes from a hidden field that can roll like a ball on a broad landscape. Where the landscape flattens, the field lingers and the push persists. Where it slopes, the field moves and the push changes its tone. You listen again to the data, asking which lullaby it matches best. The light from dying stars, the patterns in the ancient afterglow, the large-scale arrangement of galaxies, all are. Compared against these tales, so far the simplest story fits. A steady pressure, the same everywhere and everyone, small but enduring, yet the canyon remains. Why does the emptiness push at all? Why that smallness and not a little more, or less? There is also the matter of naming something real when it might be only a change in how you describe the stage. Gravity itself is geometry, the bending of space-time by mass and energy. If the rules differ slightly on the larger scales, then what looks like a mysterious substance may instead be a correction to the curves, a gentle adjustment that appears only when you step far enough back. The map might be wrong, not the terrain. You are careful not to turn this care into chaos. You build predictions and lay them beside the sky. If an idea says galaxies of a certain distance should appear slightly dimmer than they do, you notice. If it says the ancient afterglow should have a certain kind of ripple that is not observed, you reconsider. In this way, uncertainty becomes not a fog, but a lantern you carry, bright enough to reveal the next step. What you learn again and again is that the phantom is subtle. It does not clump or radiate or make new particles in accelerators. Its fingerprint is in the acceleration itself, in the way horizon lines retreat and distances inflate. It is a force of context, a maker of stage directions. You do not measure it in a jar. You infer it in the choreography of the whole. There are other melodies, too. Light that passes near great gatherings of matter bends, drawing faint arcs and smudged rings around distant galaxies. Their delicate distortions trace both the pull of gravity and the pace at which space has been widening. And in the spacing of galaxies themselves you can hear an echo, a fossil ring from sound that once rippled through the hot, early universe, a quiet yardstick set long ago and carried forward by time, that makes the listening slow, and slowness is a gift. With each careful year, more light arrives, bearing news from deeper pasts. Telescopes steady their gaze. Surveys stitch mosaics of the sky. The phantom holds steady in this patient mirror. If it is a constant pressure, it continues. If it is a changing field, it changes so gently that the change hides beneath current thresholds. Either way, it teaches you to wait. Waiting changes you. It softens the edges of certainty, makes you kinder to your own questions. You begin to accept that naming the unknown is not a failure. It is a promise. We will return to this door. You write the name on your chart and leave space for a better word later. The history of science is a string of placeholders, slipping their masks, phlogiston becoming oxygen, ether dissolving into the insight that no medium is needed for light to travel. Will this placeholder endure? If the push is the steady pressure of emptiness, it might simply be part of the grammar of the universe, as fundamental as the speed of light or the way mass curves space. If the push is a field that can move, then the universe carries weather in its vacuum. and the long forecast may include shifts we cannot yet detect. If the push is a sign that the largest scales obey slightly different rules, then the geometry of existence still keeps a secret in its seams. 3 doors, 3 stories, each consistent with what you see, each asking for more patient light. What matters most for you now is gentler. The phantom named dark energy is a way of holding the shape of a discovery without squeezing it too hard. It lets you speak about the tendency of space to widen while admitting you do not yet know why. It lets you keep company with a question without pretending it has already answered itself. It reminds you that the universe is not obligated to disclose itself quickly, and that your understanding is allowed to be a work in progress, beautifully so. You rest in that permission. The stars continue their quiet burning. Distant beacons blink into view, each one a syllable in a sentence you are still learning to read. The afterglow hums across the whole sky with the soft evenness of a lullaby. The fabric stretches, the phantom persists, and you, breathing, keep pace with the widening, neither rushing ahead nor falling behind. Your thoughts return to the canyon between theory and observation, to the roaring prediction and the whispering truth. Perhaps that gap is where new insight will grow, a canyon that will become a garden, or it may remain a cliff for a long while, teaching humility as the price of wonder. For now, you hold 2 things together, the clarity of effect and the mystery of cause. The universe is accelerating. The name you give the push is provisional. Both facts can live in one mind without conflict. Between them stretches a patient bridge called time. Time to measure, to imagine, to revise. Time to let the quiet evidence accumulate until the shape of the invisible grows. Crisp. You close this thought the way you began it, with a breath. Names are comforts, yes, but they are also invitations. Dark energy does not solve the riddle. It lets you stay with it. Outside, distances continue to blossom, petal by petal, across the unseen garden of space. Inside, your awareness loosens and drifts. The cosmos is still unfolding, and you may follow at a human pace. And somewhere in that drifting, another thought arises like a moon from behind cloud. If the push feels steady, is it truly unchanging? If the breath of the universe seems even, is it truly constant, or only constant for now? Some truths feel solid only because you haven't looked at them too long. You trust in constants, like the tick of a clock or the grip of gravity, but even the firmest laws of nature have hearts that quietly stir. Not loudly, not like thunder or fire, but in a breath barely spoken, a shift that lives between the numbers. There is a symbol, gentle and simple, tucked into the equations that describe your universe. It's called the cosmological constant, a placeholder for balance, for emptiness, for a kind of stillness that Einstein once thought the universe required and then rejected. Like a note you write but never send, he had imagined a universe that stood still, poised and permanent. And to make that happen in his equations, he introduced this constant, a mathematical push that would keep the cosmos from collapsing in on itself under the pull of gravity, a silent counterweight. But then came the discovery. The universe was not still. It was expanding. So Einstein erased the constant. He called it his greatest blunder. But maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a premonition. Because later, much later, astronomers looked deeper and saw that not only is the universe expanding, it's accelerating, stretching apart faster and faster, as if something unseen is pushing space outward. like breath caught in the lungs of eternity. And so the constant returned. Only now, it wasn't about holding still. It was about the pulse of the void, about the energy of space itself, about something that didn't fall away when galaxies thinned, but swelled in the silence between them. This energy, sometimes called dark energy, is not a wind or a field, not a substance you can touch. It is woven into space itself. Every point in the universe, even the loneliest place, holds this presence. Quiet and invisible. The cosmological constant is our way of naming that quiet. Not with understanding, but with math. A number placed into the fabric of the universe, because without it, the patterns don't hold. Because galaxies drift too fast. Because the stars are farther than they should be. And here's the strange thing. It's called a constant, but it might not be constant at all. It might shift, ever so slightly. Not in the way tides rise or planets turn, but over eons, over the breathless span of cosmic time, like a heartbeat slowing as the universe grows old, or quickening as it reaches for something we don't yet know. A constant that changes, a silence that hums, a paradox wrapped in numbers, stitched into the laws that govern everything, from the arc of galaxies to the trembling dance of particles in the dark. You might think of it like the horizon, always there, always the same, until you move. Then it bends, vanishes, reforms. It is a boundary defined not by what it is, but by where you are. The cosmological constant is like that. A number that holds shape only from a certain view. Perhaps if you stepped outside the universe, if such a thing were possible, you'd see that it was never constant at all. Just a rhythm rippling through space-time, changing with the beat of creation. This is the gentle unease at the edge of modern physics. That maybe what we thought was a number was only a shadow of our not knowing. That maybe dark energy is not a thing, but the echo of something deeper. A whisper that the vacuum is not empty, that the fabric of reality has moods, so you lie still, with this thought in your chest, that even the constants might drift, that the laws of nature might flex like reeds in the wind. Not wildly, not chaotically, but enough to let the universe breathe. What does it mean if even nothing has? Energy, if space, by itself, can swell and stretch and shape the fate of stars. You press gently against this thought, like a finger on the surface of a pond, and feel ripples that go further than you can follow. The deeper you look, the more you find that certainty is a soft illusion. Not because the universe is deceitful, but because it is alive, moving, shifting, unfolding in ways no number can perfectly hold. And so the constant remains, not as a rule, but as a question, a placeholder for a mystery that hasn't settled yet, a symbol that both completes and disturbs the equation, a stillness that carries motion inside it, like a lullaby made from tension and time. And somewhere far ahead, the next chapter waits in the dark, asking not what holds the universe together, but what tears it gently apart. You grow quiet and notice that silence is never truly empty. Even the calmest room holds a faint breath of air, a hum just beyond hearing. In the same way, the space you once called nothing does not rest. It quivers with a life that is softer than sound, subtler than light, and everywhere at once. You were taught that emptiness is absence, but the universe teaches you that emptiness is activity. A still pond whose surface is never perfectly still. You let this thought widen. When you say vacuum, you do not mean a hollow jar. You mean the baseline of reality, the canvas beneath every stroke. And that canvas is not blank. It is a restless weave of possibilities flashing open and closed. It is the pause between heartbeats that still carries a rhythm. You picture fields, not as equations, but as oceans that fill all of space. Everywhere you drift, the oceans are there, overlapping without colliding, layered like currents that do not mix yet move through one another effortlessly. Even when there is no cresting wave, the water is not motionless. Tiny ripples rise and fall, too small for your eyes, too swift for your nets, yet undeniably present. In physics, you give them names, but you can also call them what they feel, like the vacuum's pulse. You sense how these ripples briefly shape themselves into pairs, a flicker of something and a flicker of its mirror, and then fold back into quiet. They appear not as permanent citizens, but as visitors on a short visa, arriving and departing so quickly that only their effects are left behind. You might be tempted to dismiss them as bookkeeping tricks, yet the world reveals their footprints. Subtle shifts in the energies of atoms, tiny corrections to spectral lines, a feeble force between closely spaced mirrors. Each is a note from the same hidden instrument. The void is not void. It has a tone. You hold two metaphors that comfort. Think of a violin string. Even when you do not bow it, it is never perfectly still. It shares a faint sympathy with the room. Now imagine the room is all of space, and every string is already tuned, not to silence, but to the lowest murmur. It cannot shed. This murmur is the vacuum's zero line, the energy that remains when everything you can remove has been removed. It is background, baseline, ground state, but not groundless. You do not need to chase this murmur with ever larger machines to know it matters. You can hear its logic in the way light interacts with matter, in the way excited atoms settle, in the way delicate forces appear where no obvious agent is present. Even emptiness can press, ever so slightly, when you fence it in. When two flawless plates stand almost touching, the kinds of ripples that fit between them become few, while the kinds that roam outside are many. The imbalance nudges the plates together, a whisper of pressure from the vacuum's uneven chorus. It is a small effect, yet it tells a large story. What you call nothing abides by rules, and rules can push. You return to the sky, too, distance and expansion, and you ask a daring question. If emptiness carries energy, does it also carry a kind of pressure that acts on the geometry of space itself? Not a pressure that blasts and roars, but a gentle insistence that encourages distance to grow. If the vacuum's pulse is everywhere, then its influence is not local but cosmic. Who could resist a hand that touches every point at once? This is the tender idea behind a steady, space-filling push. The thought that the wind widening the universe may be the weightless breath of the vacuum. You do not need to imagine particles racing outward. You need only grant that the fabric has a preference, like dough that rises because yeast is part of its nature. Space might widen because a quiet pressure belongs to its ground state. The raisins, galaxies, separate not by marching, but because the loaf's interior swells between them. What seems like motion is really growth, but the story is not finished. When you try to calculate the strength of this vacuum breath using your sharpest tools, the numbers you obtain do not whisper, they shout. They are so large that if they were true, the universe would have torn itself into vast emptiness. Long ago, stars never born, dust never gathered, you never arrive in to ask. And yet, the actual push is gentle, modest, almost shy. Between your predictions' roar and the sky's lullaby, there is a canyon of not knowing. You stand at the rim of that canyon with humility. Either your arithmetic counts breaths that cancel one another before they can act, or the vacuum carries its pressure differently than your current language suggests, or some still hidden symmetry hushes the excess. Whatever the resolution, the evidence remains. Emptiness participates. It is not a bare stage, but an actor whose performance is quiet and persistent. You look for more anchors, more ways to weigh a whisper. You listen to the afterglow of the early universe, a faint light stretched thin across all directions. Within that glow are small temperature ripples, delicate, patterned, that reveal how the young cosmos balanced its ingredients. Those patterns, read with care, tell you whether the vacuum's pressure has been steady or shifting, strong or mild, from then until now. So far, they hum a steady tune. If the pulse varies, it does so with the patience of countenance. There is another way to feel the vacuum's presence. Watch how light bends around great gatherings of matter. The bending reveals how space is curved, and curvature answers to energy. Whether it arrives as mass, radiation, or the quiet pressure of emptiness. By mapping many such bendings, you trace how the cosmic fabric has changed its shape over time. Again, the portrait is consistent. The vacuum's hand is gentle but real. A soft palm pushing without a wrist. You might worry that this makes the universe cold. A loneliness expanding into greater loneliness. But the pulse in the vacuum can be read as a promise, not a threat. Because there is music even in the quiet, structure can be seeded. Because the ground is not featureless, ripples can grow into forms. Once, in the very early moments, a fiercer version of the vacuum's push may have rushed the cosmos into sudden, uniform expansion, ironing wrinkles flat. Later, the pulse softened, leaving faint imprints that would one day bloom into galaxies and clusters. From quiet fluctuations, grand tapestries rise. You keep your language gentle because the subject asks for gentleness. You do not say that virtual pairs pop and vanish. You say that the vacuum momentarily entertains possibilities before closing its hand. You do not insist that the ground state is a riddle solved. You say it is a riddle well posed, illuminated by many small answers. Precision is a kindness. Poetry is too. Between them, you can sleep without falling. Now, you broaden the view. If the vacuum has a pulse, does it have a center? Your first instinct is to point somewhere, but the lesson of expansion has already cured you of that habit. The pulse belongs to the fabric itself. It does not emanate from a source. There is no heart beating from a favored location, no engine. Room hidden behind a particular cluster of stars. Wherever you stand, the pulse is there, identical in its quiet insistence. Everywhere is the place where the vacuum breathes. This has a consequence you carry softly. The universe can widen without stretching from a point. There is no edge from which expansion spills. There is only the interior, everywhere, and unbounded. The raisins drift apart not because some unseen hand pushes from one side, but because the loaf swells uniformly from within. In such a cosmos, the question, where is the middle, fades like a footprint in rising dough. Middle is a comfort for small rooms. The universe needs none. You rest with one more thread. If the vacuum's pulse is steady, the separation between distant galaxies will continue to quicken, and horizons will creep closer, not nearer in miles, but nearer in meaning. There will be regions from which light can never reach you, not because light fails, but because distance grows too swiftly for messages to cross. This is not a catastrophe. It is a new definition of neighborhood. Structures that are bound will stay bound, lit by their own patient stars. The rest will slip into a dark that is more about relation than about absence. None of this turns wonder into worry. You are allowed to live at human scale while acknowledging a cosmic rhythm. You are allowed to sleep while the vacuum keeps time. You are allowed to be small without being less. The pulse does not ask for belief. It offers coherence, a way to hold the expanding sky without dropping it. So you close your eyes and picture the baseline of existence as a sea that cannot be drained. Its surface lifts and settles, never quite flat, and from its faint undulations arise the possibilities you call things. Even when no particle shines, the sea has texture. Even when no force shouts, the sea has influence. The push that carries galaxies apart may be rooted in this texture, this irreducible hum that space cannot shake. The wind in the sails of the universe may be the breath that belongs to the fabric itself. Between the numbers that overstate and the measurements that underwhelm, you locate a truth that suits the night. Emptiness is not empty, and stillness is not still. You do not pretend to know every reason. You accept that reasons can arrive slowly. You keep listening, knowing that the quiet will tell you more when you have learned how to hear it. And as you drift towards sleep, one last recognition settles like a soft blanket. The pulse you feel out there and the pulse you feel within are not the same, yet they rhyme. Both are signs of a system that sustains itself by fluctuation, not noise, but life. The universe does not hold its breath. It breathes, and breathing is how it becomes. If the vacuum truly has a heartbeat, you wonder where it beats from. Your thought reaches out for a center, and finds none at all. Perhaps the pulse belongs to every point equally, and the next question is not where it starts, but how a universe without a center keeps time. You keep looking for a middle, a calm chair in the large room of existence, a place where the rest of the furniture must face. The urge is gentle and human. A center would help you breathe. Yet space does not answer with a throne. It answers with relation. Where you stand is meaningful but not privileged, and it whispers this without offense. Expansion, in this quiet telling, is not a march from a birthplace. It is the slow change of distance between everything that already is. Bread does not swell from one corner. It rises from every bubble at once. Galaxies behave like that dough. Stretches between them lengthen while each galaxy stays mostly loyal to itself. Nothing is thrown into an outside. The outside is a word that does not apply. You might picture explosions, debris flying, a center behind the blast. But the universe is not shrapnel in a pre-existing room. Space is the room, and the room is the act. What grows is the ruler itself. With time, the same ruler lays down fewer ticks between distant landmarks. Between becomes more generous. Everything recedes from everything else, and each observer sees the same retreat. Stand anywhere, draw a circle, and watch the far edge drift away. Move to another place, draw again, and the edge drifts the same way. Each circle speaks as if it were central, and none of them lie. This is not a trick. It is the signature of a world without a preferred seat. The feeling of centrality is a byproduct of expansion, not evidence of a hidden pole. When people ask about an edge, the words smuggle in the wrong picture. An edge would require an outside to lean against. Space does not lean. Expansion does. Not invade a neighboring emptiness. It is the deepening of the emptiness we already mean when we speak about between. Like silence that can become quieter without moving anywhere. The void can become roomier without traveling. The beginning is easily misunderstood. You may imagine a tight pearl bursting into surrounding darkness. But early times were not a dot in a larger space. Early times were the same everywhere, denser, hotter, closer-knit. A small-scale universe is still a universe through and through. Wind the clock back, and you move toward a condition shared by every place, not toward a location. An ancient hush greets you from all sides, the cooled afterglow of the first light that could finally travel. It arrives nearly the same wherever. You listen. This evenness is a clue. It says the youth of the cosmos was not biased toward any direction or address. The afterglow is the lullaby of an everywhere beginning, softened by billions of years of lengthening breath. Light carries the evidence of distance growing. As space stretches, waves lengthen, their crests farther apart than when they began. A star's message sets out with one rhythm and arrives with a slower one. Not because the star tired, but because the path changed pace. The farther the voyage, the longer the syllable. Redder light records a long, yawning road, if no point is special. Why are there clusters, filaments, and great empty rooms between? Small unevennesses in the early hush gave gravity material to arrange. Given time, those faint preferences grew into a web, bright knots and dark corridors. The web has notable crossings, yes, but the rules beneath it are democratic. The recipe is the same in every kitchen, even if the cookies cool in different shapes. Sometimes you worry that expansion should pull you apart, that your body, your bookcase, your town must be swelling in sympathy. They are not. Local bonds win their own elections. At the scale of atoms and apples, of oceans and orbits, forces sturdier than cosmic ease hold fast. Only where gravity releases its grip, only on distances that no single bound system can police, does the large breath become noticeable. Time partners with this breath. Clocks tick by local commitments, but the wide story ties them together. Expansion is not merely about length. It is a choreography of space and time. The tempo can change as the energy of emptiness sets the beat. If that beat stays steady, distance will keep relaxing, and more islands of stars will drift beyond one another's ability to converse. What does from nowhere mean? From everywhere in proportion. No address can claim to be the cauldron, while others are the steam. You may center a map on your town, and a friend may center a map on theirs. Both maps are true, but neither implies that reality arcs around there. Red dot, the dots are conveniences. The shape beneath them is the same with or without them. Travel, too, inherits your indoor intuitions and becomes confused. On a highway, what lies ahead grows larger and what lies behind shrinks. In the big geometry, landmarks can dim not because you pass them, but because the space between you and them is learning to yawn. What you can reach today may fall out of conversation tomorrow, not as punishment, but as the mathematics of an instrument being tuned while you are playing it. If you try to imagine where the universe expands into pores, that question has meaning. Only when there is a surrounding stage. Space brings its own stage. The fabric is not stretching into a waiting vacuum. The vacuum is the meaning of stretch. This is hard for a creature who learnt distance by walking across floors. You have to trade floors for relationships, rulers for ratios. There is comfort woven into this strangeness, without a crown position. There is also no exile. There is no cosmic suburb where the addresses are less real. Every coordinate participates. If you feel far from one thing, you are necessarily close to another. Near and far are partners, not hierarchies. They trade roles as the scale changes. Like dancers, who alternate, who leads. The absence of a center loosens an anxious knot. Your life does not have to be performed at the midpoint of all things. Meaning does not drip from a throne. It condenses in relations. You are important because you connect, not because you occupy a pedestal. The cosmos gives the same permission to every point. Dignity is shared, not assigned by altitude. So where did it all begin? The question is kind, and it can be answered softly. It began where you sit, where I sit, and where a galaxy you will never see also sits in every place when the scale was small. Beginning is not a location, but a property of the whole. You cannot travel to the birthplace because you never left it. It traveled with you as the ruler loosened. Edges exist in a different sense, not as walls, but as limits to conversation. Beyond certain distances, light launched today will never arrive. Those are horizons, not fences. They move with the breath. They depend on the beat. In the far future, many lamps will slip beneath those horizons, and your sky will quiet. Yet, within your reachable neighborhood, suns will still rise and shores will still be named. From any balcony in the universe, the same law is read. The farther a beacon, the faster it recedes. This rule does not reveal a crown, only the tempo of the choir. Move to a different balcony, read it again, and the song is unchanged. This is the democracy of distance, and it is worth trusting. It asks for humility and rewards it with coherence. If the shape of the whole is still unknown, the lack of a preferred center does not depend on the answer. Flat, open, curved, multiply connected each. Possibility respects the same modesty. Even if, in some cosmic topology, a straight path could bring you back to your starting point, that starting point is not enthroned. It is simply one stop on a loop that belongs equally to every other stop. Perhaps the most intimate part of this lesson is how it restores you to scale. You do not need to own the middle to matter. Your questions are not smaller because the map has no pole. They are kinder. They align with the way truth behaves, as something that does not demand a fixed seat, only honest relations among many seats. That is a good way to fall asleep with belonging that does not require conquest. You float, not toward, not away, just within. Within is a direction that points everywhere. Within is the trust that the net holds, that distance can widen without tearing, that the score can transpose without losing the tune. This is not less than a center, it is more. It is a center shared so widely that the word center dissolves into reverence. Let the urge for an edge become a question instead. Where does seeing begin to fail? There lies the kinder boundary, the horizon that moves as the breath proceeds. Tomorrow's chapter will lean toward that horizon, toward the line where light runs out of hours. For now, let the absence of a throne be your pillow. Let relations be enough. Let the universe rise everywhere, as soft bread in a warm, patient bowl. You rest where there is no middle, and feel another boundary instead, a horizon made of time where you see things. It is not a wall, it is a promise. Let's turn toward it, quietly. You think of time as a single stream, clear and steady, moving forward with even patience. You picture it like a ribbon you could run your fingers along, the same in every place, the same for every heart. But the stream is braided. It widens here and narrows there. In some reaches, the current slackens. In others, it quickens and pulls. You discover that time, like space, can stretch. And once you feel the stretch, you cannot go back to the simple thread. You learn this first from gravity's hush. Where mass gathers, time softens its pace, as if kneeling in respect. Clocks closer to heavy things tick a little slower. Far away, where the pull is faint, moments lengthen and stand taller, like grass in windless air. You live within this uneven meadow every day without noticing. Instruments quietly keep the world in tune, making small corrections so that the song of seconds stays coherent for everyone listening. Then you listen for a second source, one that does not cling like gravity, but opens like a door. Emptiness itself can shape the rhythm. When space grows, the distance between pulses grows too. A heartbeat that leaves one island of stars and crosses the widening sea arrives farther apart, stretched by the journey itself. Light carries the proof. The crests of a distant wave reach you with more room between them than when they began. Events unfolding far away do not only look dimmer, they look slower because the path itself has grown. You think of a candle that brightens and fades with a familiar tempo, a curve of rise and fall known by careful practice. Seen nearby, the curve keeps its cadence. Seen after traveling through a swelling fabric, the same curve lengthens like a sigh. You can measure that lengthening. You can hold it against expectation and feel the difference like fingers finding a seam. The expansion of space turns time into a broader bowl, and the bowl deepens with distance. It helps to picture a drum whose skin is relaxing. Each tap arrives farther from the next, but the drummer has not changed. The change belongs to the stage, and the stage is everywhere. When space stretches, intervals stretch. The rhythm of the distant past reaches you as a slower song, not because the singer forgot the tempo, but because the hall itself grew while the notes were crossing it. You begin to let go of the idea that there is one universal clock set above the sky. There are many clocks, and each one keeps time according to its neighborhood. Some ride the calm, far from heavy gatherings, and their seconds are long and generous. Some linger in deep wells of mass, and their seconds are compact, rich, and close set. Some drift with the overall widening, letting the scale of the universe itself set their pace. In this choir, there is no single conductor. Harmony arises from translation. Even your own body, in principle, can feel the divide. Add speed, and the beats spread. The way a runner's breath changes the rhythm of roadside trees. Rush past the world, and your inner metronome counts with longer steps. Rest, and it returns to its calmer walk. Space and time are not separate pages. They are a woven cloth, and any tug in one thread slightly reshapes the pattern of the other. Tonight you are drawn to the gentler idea that emptiness itself can tilt the loom. If the fabric contains a quiet pressure, a background urge to widen, then the way moments stack is altered by absence as much as by presence. In regions that are emptier, the pressure has more room to be itself, and the expansion can be felt more clearly. In the vast reaches between the bright islands, the seconds swell. The intervals between far-off heartbeats arrive as if the universe were granting you more time to listen. There is a tenderness in accepting that your measures are local. The universe keeps a natural count for travelers who drift with the flow, moving neither toward nor away from neighbors except by the gentle tug of expansion itself. For such travelers, the grand clock is simple, but no one's experience is entirely grand. Each clock is a pocket watch shaped by its habitat. You learn to translate between them the way you translate between languages, careful with nuance, attentive to context. Consider the way horizons behave when the widening quickens. There are places so far that their light will never reach you, not because light fails, but because distance grows too quickly for messages to cross the swelling gap. Beyond such horizons now becomes a delicate word. Their present and your present cannot touch. Moments pass that will never share a page with yours, and the idea of simultaneity loosens like a knot undone by patient hands. On the largest scale, time becomes a local dialect. You find comfort in knowing that these slips of time have been witnessed in tender ways. A distant brightening that fades lingers longer the farther away it began, exactly as a widening world would suggest. Patterns in the ancient light that bathes the whole sky tell how the early seconds arranged themselves, how swiftly the first minutes cooled, how the original cadence settled into the rhythm you inhabit now. Even the clocks that orbit quietly above must be tuned to this layered song, or their reports drift off-key. In the everyday, you are spared the dizziness. Differences are small nearby. Earth is not a crushing giant. Your steps are close together. Your breaths align with those around you. But the principle endures, a gentle rule that becomes more legible as you look farther out. The universe is a river with shifting channels. You float on one. Others float on others. No single current defines the river, and yet the river is one. You. Return to the question you carried in. What if emptiness, not only mass, does some of the warping? The lesson of acceleration suggests that the background pressure of space can alter not only distances, but durations. A steady outward urge sets a pace for how intervals between things grow, and with them the intervals between moments. You do not need to imagine a hand turning a dial marked time. You only need to grant that time is a measure of relationships, and relationships depend on the stage that holds them. There is humility in admitting you measure what arrives, not what is. You receive light shaped by its long crossing, and so you receive time shaped by that crossing as well. Your reconstruction is careful and kind. You work backward through the stretch to infer the original tempo, honoring the traveler's fatigue without mistaking it for the traveler's intention. The task becomes a translation of clocks. Theirs to yours, then back again to theirs. With practice, your intuition shifts. You stop asking why distant things take so long and begin asking how much the path has lengthened. You stop imagining one absolute second and begin attending to families of seconds, all sincere within their neighborhoods. You stop fighting the unevenness and let it guide you to a deeper coherence. The world is not broken by its variety. It is held together by it. The braids do not tangle, they make a rope. You notice, too, that your own sense of time shares this. Pliability. Waiting can feel like a lengthening corridor. Joy can compress an afternoon into a ring you can wear. These are not the physics of clocks, but they rhyme with them. Somewhere between feeling and fact, there is a bridge strong enough to carry understanding without collapsing into mere metaphor. You cross it gently, grateful that the language of your life can point toward the language of the sky. What, then, of the future in such a universe? If the widening continues, if the pressure of emptiness remains, more horizons will appear. More regions will slip beyond reach, and the choir will thin to local voices. Time will still pass, but fewer distant measures will overlap with yours. The great concert will become an intimacy. Nearby stars, bound companions, small communities, of light singing into a thickening quiet. None of this lessens the dignity of the song. It only changes the hall and the past. The farther back you listen, the tighter the measures become. There was a time when the fabric was denser and the global beat was faster. when light moved through a hotter, more crowded room and the seconds felt shorter in the grand count. You can still hear it in the background glow, in the small variations that record how the first harmonies formed. The present is slower by comparison, and perhaps the future slower still. Not worse, not better. Just a different tempo for a score that never stops. There is peace in ending here, with the recognition that the clock you carry is honest but local, and that other honest clocks exist. You do not need to force them into one face. You only need to learn the conversions, to treat each ticking with respect, to let the river speak in plural. Time is not a tyrant on a throne. It is a conversation across scales, patient and polyphonic. You exhale, and your breath finds its place in that conversation. Somewhere far away, a light curve is lengthening for you. Somewhere very near, your pulse keeps faithful time to your own small gravity. Both are true, neither cancels the other, and the unity between them is the quiet geometry you have been learning to trust. You listen for warmth more than for words, for a hush that keeps the memory of when everything was close. You tune your attention until it settles on a soft, even glow that arrives from every direction at once. It is not bright the way starlight is bright. It feels like room tone for the cosmos, a background that remains when the rest is dimmed. You let your breathing slow until it matches that steadiness, and the sky feels quietly warm with ancient light. They call it the afterglow of creation. Yet it behaves like a lullaby that forgot its lyrics and kept only its key. This light began its journey when the universe was young and crowded. A hot, glowing fog where particles and photons bumped and scattered without rest. As the whole cooled, the fog thinned. Charges paired into the first stable atoms, and the glare finally found paths that stayed straight. From that moment, the light traveled onward, patient and free, sharing the expansion of space itself. You sense its temperature in images before you learn its number. It is not the heat of a candle or even the bite of winter air, but a tenderness, just a few steps above absolute night. Stretch the waves long enough, and their color slips from visible to microwave. The kind of quiet warmths a kitchen device borrows, but the sky produced first. What reaches you now is not the original tone. The widening of space has been drawing each crest apart for billions of years, like beads on a string eased by careful hands. Uniformity is the first confession this glow makes. Point your instrument anywhere, and the same gentle brightness pours in. The second confession hides within the first. Atop that remarkable evenness live tiny ripples, faint rises and falls, written into the temperature by early motion. They are small differences of only a few parts in 100,000, yet they are everything. The universe used those ripples the way a potter uses fingerprints, guiding clay toward form that could last. Before the light went free, the young cosmos acted like a resonant fluider blend of matter and light pressing and releasing itself. Waves moved through it, compressions and rarefactions, sound in a sense that needs no ears. When the fog cleared and the light escaped, the pattern of those waves froze into the glow. It is as if someone stilled a drum while it vibrated and left. The drumhead caught in mid-ripple for you to read a universe later. Map the sky in this light, and you do not draw countenance. You render a quilt of tiny temperature spots, warm patches and cool patches mottled across the dome. The spacings and relative strengths of those spots form a rhythm, a set of notes and overtones that tell you about ingredients. How much luminous matter, how much quiet mass that does not shine, how easily the early soup could slosh. The loudest Note reveals a favored scale, a typical wave that had time to swell once before the light went its way. Measure how large that favored wave appears, and you learn something tender and global about geometry, whether the overall shape leans, curves, or rests close to level. The first note says the balance is gentle, as if space lays its sheet almost flat upon the table. Fold that lesson with others, and you arrive at a recipe that adds up without sharp bends, ordinary atoms in small measure, an invisible scaffolding in larger measure, and a kind of emptiness that behaves as though it carries pressure of its own. There is humility in saying as though, because names can arrive before understanding. You can describe the portions without yet knowing the deep nature of each. Still, the glow is generous. It remembers the early tug of war between gravity and pressure, remembers how quickly matter could gather, and from these hints you draw a picture that is simple in law yet rich in composition. The map becomes a cookbook with margins full of soft instructions. Heat slowly, stir gently, allow to settle. The smoothness of the afterglow carries another puzzle wrapped in calm. How did distant places settle on nearly the same temperature when there was hardly time for far regions to share a message? The cosmos seems to have coordinated its blanket without a meeting. One way through the puzzle is that the young universe spent a moment in a quicker swelling, a brief smoothing that let distant places start as neighbors before drifting apart. The afterglow keeps the peace that such a beginning would leave. Look again at the map and you will see more than temperature. The light is slightly polarized, combed by its last scatterings. Some comb marks are straight and orderly, like frost lines on a window pane, and their pattern confirms the story of waves, densities, and smooth beginnings. Other comb marks would curl if they were strong enough to notice. We are still listening for those faint curls. If they ever hum with a very early tremor, they will carry news from a time even earlier than this glow dot. As this ancient light walks across the ages, it does not pass through nothingness untouched. Gravity draws its route into gentle detours, as if the road were rubber and heavy towns pressed shallow valleys into it. The pathways bend so little you would not notice by eye, yet enough that the final pattern is slightly blurred. From that blurring, you can reconstruct the invisible architecture, the great web of matter that grew from the early ripples. It is a braided cartography traced by the way light was tugged. There is a second, subtler conversation between this light and the late-time universe. When a beam glides into a deep valley of gravity, it gains a little energy falling in and should lose the same climbing out. But if, while the beam is inside, the valley relaxes its walls, sinking a breath lower, the beam emerges with a gift it did not have before. It leaves with a hint of brightness borrowed from the changing landscape. For valleys to relax, something must be loosening the grip of structure on the largest scales. The effect is small and statistical. You do not see it in a single patch. You hear it by letting the afterglow sing with other maps, surveys of galaxies that trace where the valleys and hills of gravity lie today. Cross the melodies and you find that the late-time relief has indeed shifted. The acceleration of expansion is written not only in the measured fading of distant stellar explosions, but also in the slightly altered timbre of this ancient hum. The earliest light did not know acceleration at its birth, but it learned about it during the long walk between the smooth warmth and the faint roughness. A narrative of becoming unfolds. The tiny cool spots were places where matter lingered longer, seeds that gravity watered into galaxies and clusters. The tiny warm spots were places where matter thinned. Over billions of years, the early score grew into a vast web. Nodes of starlight connected by bridges of gas and quiet mass, interlaced with voids so large their silence feels architectural. The whisper sketched the future in powder-soft strokes and stepping stones. It helps to trade the image of a fireworks blast for the image of a changing ruler. Expansion is not debris racing through a pre-existing room. It is the room itself growing wider, spacing between its marks. The notes in the afterglow speak about that spacing. A certain stitch length, held on the sky, becomes a ruler for the whole. By checking how large that stitch appears, you test the geometry of the cloth and the pace at which the cloth has been stretched across time. Certainty does not arrive all at once, so humility stays close. Instruments learn to quiet their own static. Maps compare notes. Old results are drawn again with new care. Balloons, ground telescopes, and satellites have each added threads, and the tapestry has converged rather than frayed. There are tensions. At the edges, small disagreements about exact tempos and weights, and these keep curiosity awake without shaking the bed. The larger picture has proven sturdy, hot and smooth at the start, structure thereafter, and a present ruled by widening space. What does the afterglow whisper to you personally, here in the dark? Perhaps that warmth can be a kind of not the knowledge of strategies and proofs, but the knowledge of belonging. You are part of a pattern that once was a vibration, a shared pressure that rang across everything. Your body keeps a private version of that story in the way it holds heat. It cools at night and warms in sunlight. The great murmur and your own quiet breathing are not the same, yet they rhyme. In the end, this map is a mirror. It shows you an early face of everything you will ever see, including yourself. The slight asymmetries that allowed galaxies to blossom also allow questions to exist. If the glow were perfectly even, nothing would have formed, not stars, not planets, not the wandering organ that names them. Imperfection, measured in millionths, is the mother of detail, and detail is the mother of meaning. The night's hush is therefore not emptiness, but invitation. Let the invitation remain open as you drift. In the chapters that follow, the whisper will meet other messengers, standard candles that fade with a known grace, ripples in the spacing of galaxies that keep the memory of early sound, and clocks that tick by the geography of time. Their testimonies lean together, each reinforcing a gentle claim that distance is learning to grow faster, that the wide fabric relaxes its weave with age. The afterglow does not demand belief. It offers coherence. For now, it is enough to know that the oldest free light still bathes you, effortless and patient. It traces the ceiling of your room and the dome of the sky with the same plain song. It asks you to trust that a murmur can carry a map, that warmth can be wise, that the early and the late can talk across impossible spans without raising their voices. Sleep with that thought tucked under your pillow. A universe large enough to be senseless, gentle enough to leave clues in a scale of millionths, and generous enough to share them with anyone who leans in to listen. So you breathe with it, the evenness, the ripples, the slight brightening that signals a changing road. You are not outside the song. You are one of its notes, brief but true. And somewhere, just beyond this resting, another instrument is tuning. A lighthouse star that will teach distance by how it fades. And with that fading, will show how speed itself can soften into something wider than motion. Gently you have learned to be gentle with appearances. What looks like nothing often carries the most. The still surface of a pond holds currents you do not see. So when the sky offers you its dark between scattered stars, you do not trust the quiet. You listen harder. Empty, you discover, is only a word for what your senses cannot gather yet. Emptiness is not the absence of everything. It is the presence of something subtle. Think of space as a field of tall, soft grass. Even when the air is calm, the blades quiver with tiny motions. A passing breeze reveals the pattern, but the wind was there before you noticed. The vacuum is like that, a meadow of fields that fill every corner, moving in ways that seldom rise above the threshold of sight. These fields are not draped onto space like cloth on a frame. They are the frame and the cloth together. They extend without edges, overlapping without colliding. Where nothing is, something remains. The baseline, the ground hum, the quiet scaffolding on which every visible thing is built. Particles are not tenants who rent rooms in the void. They are knots in the weave, brief or lasting, depending on how the weave folds and holds. You did not learn this from one grand announcement. You learned it from small, stubborn clues. Atoms glow with colors that shift by hair widths, because the ground they sit upon is not perfectly still. Two flawless mirrors, set very close, feel a shy nudge toward each other because the ripples that fit between them are fewer than those that roam outside. Even in controlled emptiness, a pressure remains. The vacuum cannot be perfectly quiet, because quiet itself has structure, so empty space is an illusion born of scale. The canvas already holds a faint design, and every stroke must negotiate with it. Whatever you do with matter, you are conversing with the background that all things share. It is here, patient and pervasive, shaping outcomes in ways so small. They are easy to miss until you learn how to listen. Seen in this light, the idea that something pushes galaxies apart grows less foreign. Maybe the push is not a wind that blows through space. Maybe it is a pressure that belongs to space, not in space, but of it. Bread rises not because raisins hurry outward, but because the dough swells from its nature. If the fabric of the cosmos carries a small preference to widen, then distance grows even when nothing marches. You are careful with words like force, because they invite arrows and engines. The picture here is gentler, a tension in the fabric, a tendency in the stage, a property that announces itself everywhere with the same quiet tone. Where space is, the tendency is. Where there is more space, there is more room for the tendency to be itself. The result is a feedback that looks, from within, like acceleration. No shove, only a ceaseless lean. Humility remains. When bold arithmetic tried to compute the strength of this lean, the numbers shouted. They predicted a pressure so large the cosmos would have unraveled before stars could gather. Yet the sky speaks softly. Still, the whisper persists. Steady across many ways of listening, the slow brightening and fading of distant candles, the ancient afterglows, delicate grain, the preferred spacing in the great web of galaxies. Separate paths converge on the same conclusion. The stage itself participates. This is how the illusion loosens its hold. Void becomes a reservoir that never runs dry. Pour everything out, and a residue remains, not debris at the bottom of the jar, but the jar's own material. Space can be emptied of dust and atoms and light. It cannot be emptied of itself. You might ask whether these fields have a center, a place from which they emanate. The wider lesson of expansion answers no. There is no privileged middle, no cosmic, heart-pumping influence outward. The baseline belongs to every point equally, and the properties it carries do not need a source. The meadow does not begin at one blade. It is meadow everywhere at once. Your images begin to change your questions. Instead of asking what moves through empty space to push things apart, you ask what quality of the stage makes separation the natural drift. Instead of what fills the gaps, you ask what makes a gap a place with rules. The illusion of empty space is the belief that gaps lack commitments. They do not. They are bound to the grammar of the fields that inhabit them. You sense that grammar by watching light behave over great distances. Each crest is a marker of time. As the fabric swells, the markers arrive farther apart, not because the source has slowed, but because the hallway lengthened while the sound was crossing it. The deep red of ancient light is not a stain. It is an honest record of a long journey through a corridor that keeps growing, and there is more than stretching. The fields can store energy, not as a blaze, but as a level. The level is small, yet its constancy is power. A slow, even pressure, applied everywhere and always, can accomplish what no sudden shove can. It can change the destiny of the whole. The universe does not need to be driven into expansion. It needs only to be allowed to do what its ground prefers: widen without end. On human scales, a property like that slips past you. In a cup, a lake's rise looks like stillness. On the scale of galaxies, stillness becomes influence. The most delicate baseline you can measure in laboratories grows into a deciding factor. When it is spread across the breadth of the cosmos, language can mislead, too. When you say matter on one side and space on the other, you are cutting a continuum. The fields that make matter possible also define space's lowest hum. A particle is a localized knot in a field that otherwise fills everything. If all the knots were undone, the field would remain. If all the strokes were erased, the canvas would remain. The illusion is to mistake knots for cloth and forget the cloth when the knots are gone. Can the cloth change its weave? Perhaps, on small scales, rules tested 1,000 times hold with friendly reliability. On the larger scales, you test them still, aware that a fabric might soften or tighten in places, yet unmeasured. If what you call a constant is tied to the vacuum's level, and that level has reasons you do not yet know, then even calm can carry a history. A sea that looks flat from shore may have tides so slow you need decades to feel them. For now, the calm appears steady, and the simplest account ties much together. Remote beacons fade more than expected. The oldest light wears a particular pattern. Clusters and voids mark a preferred scale in their spacing. The braid holds. You leave room for nuance, because the universe often asks for it gently, then insistently, then all at once. All this turns the illusion of empty space into a lesson about attention. Attend to what does not announce itself loudly. A stage can decide the play. Absence can have character as definite as presence. The quiet between notes sets the time signature. The vacuum between galaxies sets the universe's intention. The lesson glows in daily life as well. Silence shapes a sentence. Pause gives meaning to music. You begin to feel that the most important things do not always occupy space. Sometimes they define it. What you call nothing is often the condition for everything, not merely a backdrop, but a participant with preferences, a host with habits. There is kindness in this way of seeing. It refuses to treat emptiness as a threat. It treats it as a partner, one that does not grab, does not command, but leans. The lean is slight, but across long distances and long times, slight becomes decisive. A feather, falling forever, can tap a bell so you rest with the thought that the universe widens, not because a foreign wind sweeps through, but because the room itself is of a kind that likes to be larger. The room needs no walls to push. It simply becomes more room. Within that becoming, islands of light assemble, burn, and fade, while the baseline hum keeps time. Expansion is not something that happens in space. It is something space is dot, if space is crowded with quiet qualities. You ask what else it might be crowded with, not objects, but possibilities. Perhaps there are other stable baselines the fields could have chosen, other ways for the fabric to be itself. Perhaps what feels like the only design is one pattern among many, some barely different, some utterly strange, the illusion of empty. Space gives way to a wider thought. Even nothing might have options. You do not need to settle those options tonight. You need only keep the door unlocked in your mind. The name vacuum is not a verdict. It is a reminder that what escapes, sight can still hold the world in place. You keep listening, you keep measuring. You let the smallest effects teach the largest ideas. Over years, the quiet reveals itself and revises the map. And if the quiet is itself a choice among many quiets, the next question is gentle and vast. What decides which quiet you live in? What selects this baseline, this pressure, this hum? If space can be more than one kind of emptiness, might there be other rooms, other gardens, where other hums define what can exist, where empty means something else entirely? You breathe, and let that thought settle like dew on the meadow you cannot see. The grass trembles, though no wind appears to blow. The blades touch and part, touch and part. Between them, a path opens that is not a road, but a way of looking. You take that way, unhurried, and the universe expands at your pace. Gently, you allow a quiet thought to widen. Reality may be larger than your phrases, and kinder than your need for a single frame. The word universe relaxes in your mouth. It stops being a rigid bowl and becomes a horizonless cup, its brim never found. If the portion you can hold is already vast, what of the part beyond your reach? The question does not sharpen your pulse, it slows it. It asks for patience, for the soft bravery of carrying more than one maybe, and for the calm to let them breathe beside each other. You rest inside permission. Ordinarily, when you say universe, you mean everything. Practically, you also mean everything you can, in principle, receive light from. The region whose messages have had time to arrive. That region is enormous, but not the whole. Beyond. Its stretches of the same likely continue. Galaxies braided by filaments, and deep voids like cathedral rooms. No throne, no privileged address. That is not a multiverse. It is simply more universe than you can consult today. The sky keeps secrets. Politely. It is not required to empty its pockets, and it rarely does so all at once for impatient minds anyway. The multiverse enters as a family of cautious possibilities. One path begins with fierce early swelling, so quick and uneven that widely separated, patches of space fell out of conversation forever. Each patch cooled on its own schedule, and in cooling, certain cosmic settings may have frozen differently. The strength of gravity's pull, the weight of the electron, the hush pressure of emptiness, the pace of expansion, the rules by which particles settle into companionship, could, in principle, land on distinct values. Not broken or superior, just different tunings on the same patient instrument. Different valleys, different songs, same logic. If those tunings vary, the songs vary. Picture a patch where the hush pressure that now speeds expansion were much larger. Space would relax so fast that matter could barely greet itself. Galaxies would not collect, stars would not build furnaces, chemistry would never idle long enough to dream. If the pressure were negative, the whole story would turn inward and collapse before the first verse finished. Between those extremes lies a narrow band where structure grows and lingers. Only there can questions cool into listeners who wonder why conditions feel so precisely kind. Surprise softens. Compatibility explains your address. Another path comes from quantum chance. On the smallest stage, several outcomes are allowed, and ordinary language asks nature to choose. One sober reading of the mathematics says nature never chooses, only one. Every allowed thread continues, separated not by distance, but by narrative. You do not multiply places so much as multiply histories. Reality explores its options in parallel, while each observer experiences one coherent storyline. The nearby stories do not shout across, they continue quietly beside yours. It is pluralism without spectacle, a careful suggestion rather than a carnival of impossible worlds. Many outcomes, one calm lived line. A further path uses the image of a landscape. Some delicate theories imagine tiny vibrations that can rest in many stable arrangements. Picture valleys across a sprawling terrain. Fall into one valley, and you inherit a particular physics. Masses and charges, the rates at which forces invite or resist, the way emptiness nudges the fabric to widen. Another valley yields different properties while keeping logic intact. If the terrain is broad and the early swelling is generous, many valleys may be populated somewhere, each carrying a recipe, each recipe able to bake a different sky. Same cookbook, countless regional kitchens. These are not declarations, they are careful proposals. Physics is happiest when ideas touch measurement, and measurement is shy when horizons are strict. Still, small windows remain. If two neighboring patches once brushed before drifting apart, the bruise could appear as a circular, subtle mark in the oldest light. If the young fabric rang with particular notes, faint echoes may lace the microwave afterglow. None of this is simple to see, yet the sky has surprised us before with patterns hiding in noise. So we look, slowly, with instruments that learn to hush their own imperfections. Patience reveals reliable whispers, statistics offer another window. Suppose deep constants are drawn from a broader menu. Then the distribution of structures, how galaxies cluster, how the early glow is mottled might hint at favored ranges. We cannot read the menu directly, but we can ask whether our plate looks typical among plates that could host eaters. That is not proof, it is an easing of astonishment. A good explanation should make the ordinary feel ordinary, not miraculous. It should not smuggle in new improbabilities, larger than the one it hopes to calm. Gentleness and parsimony can walk. Together, they steady surprise without inventing heavier surprises. All these maybes wrap around a measured fact. On the larger scales, distances grow faster with time. The shove is gentle, yet everywhere. Compared with the furnace of the young cosmos, it is small. Compared with the far future, it is decisive. If many patches exist with many values, observers naturally arise where the shove is calm enough for complexity to accumulate. You replace why this precise number with of all possible numbers, we wake where waking is possible. It is not an answer, but it is a context. It converts astonishment into compatibility without closing the book. For now, If reality is plural in any of these ways, your meaning does not thin. It changes shape. You become less like a solitary lighthouse and more like a note in a choir. Distinct, necessary, harmonizing with others you may never hear. Dignity moves from uniqueness to relation. What matters is the coherence within your small radius, the honesty of your questions, and the tenderness with which you keep what you can keep. The larger architecture does not cancel the immediacy of this work. It may bless it gently by reminding you that care scales from the palm to the sky. Caution remains a friend. Many should not be a blanket thrown over puzzles you do not wish to solve. Let plurality stay provisional and accountable. Ask it to make contact, even indirectly, with observables. Ask for risky predictions, small circles in the old light, particular fingerprints in the way gravity bends that light, or statistical alignments unlikely without company beyond our horizon. A dream that refuses to be woken by data may be lovely, but it is not yet science's kind of dream. We must be willing to wake, compare notes, and change our minds with steadiness. That is fidelity. Meanwhile, reliable voices keep singing. The ancient afterglow is almost uniform, with tiny ripples that record early vibrations. Far galaxies redden as space stretches, each crest of their light pulled farther from the next. These are not stories we tell because they are pretty. They are measurements we can repeat. Any broader picture must harmonize with these notes. The choir must tune itself to the soloists already present, or step down and learn the key again. The facts are not harsh. They are firm, like a metronome that keeps time for gentler melodies. We follow their patient, clarifying beat faithfully. Under the grand question rests a personal one. How do you carry so much possibility without drifting? The answer stays local. You do not need parallel histories to be kind. You do not need other valleys to repair this garden. The multiverse, if it exists, does not absolve. It amplifies. It enlarges the stage on which care is meaningful, but your cues still come from this floor, this breath, this neighbor. Responsibility does not dilute when the map widens. It clarifies where your hands can truly reach and where listening is. Wiser than grasping or confident proclamation, that humility steadies. Even so, the mind likes to stretch to keep its balance. You let it try on alterations. Nudge the cosmic shove upward, and stars disperse before ignition. Nudge it downward, and everything falls back into a brief, bright hush. Change the constants that set how atoms bind, and chemistry falters like a song sung in a key no voice can hold. Threads that seemed arbitrary reveal themselves as tuned strings. Adjust them too far, and the music stops, not with a crash, but with a failure to begin, a stage forever prepared and forever empty. Silence where stories never start. Because the threads knit together, a quiet selection enters without pride. It whispers that, of course, you find yourself where the music plays long enough to harbor listeners. That is not destiny. It is compatibility. It does not explain why the orchestra exists, only why you sit where the acoustics work. It softens shock while leaving wonder unharmed. You trade a little surprise for a little comprehension and keep the awe you need for sleep and for morning. Questions. The room feels hospitable, not miraculous, and gratitude replaces trembling at the accident of your address. Rarity invites tending, not vanity. There is also a boundary of method. What counts as science when the beyond may be unreachable? The line is not sharp, but it is real. You can still demand contact. Even if you cannot step into another patch, you can look for shared consequences here. Different pictures can predict different textures in data we already collect. They can suggest cross-checks between maps of galaxies and maps of the afterglow, between the bending of light and the statistics of its noise. The beyond must leave a shadow in this room, or remain a poem awaiting rehearsal. Testable shadows earn attention. In the absence of proof, humility makes a good blanket. Maybe is not surrender, it is an honest verb tense. Let your sentences lean into could and might. Remember that earlier generations did not expect time and space to be joined, or emptiness to have influence. Both lessons arrived gently but firmly through measurement after seasons of brave uncertainty. Keep the habit, welcome ideas, test them, and keep only what endures the glare without complaint. This rhythm does not chill wonder. It warms it by letting awe and accuracy share the same pillow for a peaceful night. You begin with a simple balance. Every gathering asks for a counterweight. You have known pull all your life, the steady insistence that keeps you grounded, the patience that gathers dust into stones and stones into worlds. Yet the wider story hints at something else, something that does not clutch but loosens, not a hand that grabs but a palm that opens. You do not call it fantasy, you call it possibility, a quiet partner to the pull you trust. You picture a fabric held in two moods. One thread is gravity, a faithful stitch drawing things together. The other is a subtler thread and ease in the cloth, a tendency to relax and widen. When the fabric is crowded, the gathering thread speaks louder. Where it is open, the relaxing thread has room to sing. Push and pull share the same loom. The pattern written across the sky is the song they sing together. To speak of a twin to gravity is not to summon fiction, but to widen what you allow gravity to be. The rule you already trust says that mass and energy tells space how to curve, and the curve tells matter how to move. Nothing in that promise requires every curve to be a bowl. Some curves are hills, some are saddles. A bowl invites approach. A hill encourages separation. If the stage bends in the right way, paths that would have met begin to drift apart. Repulsion is not rebellion. It is geometry taking another shape. You have met a hint of this twin under a simpler name, the steady pressure that belongs to empty. Space, it does not tug on objects directly. It reshapes the stage beneath them. Call it a background lean, a soft tension that appears wherever there is room to appear. In equations, it looks spare. In mind, it feels like reluctance to be cramped. When the room is made larger, there is more room for that reluctance, and so the enlarging feeds itself gentle, persistent, everywhere at once. But you can imagine other twins, too, quieter and more intricate. Perhaps there is a field that does not stay perfectly level, a sea whose surface drifts over eras, slowly changing how strongly the stage prefers to widen. Perhaps the grammar of curvature itself relaxes a little on the very largest scales, so that the pull that rules planets eases its grip between the islands of galaxies. None of this requires a new gust racing through space. It asks only for nuance in how the stage invites motion and how it prefers separation. You keep your metaphors close to the ground. Think of springs and countersprings hidden in a bridge. Under light loads, the main cable defines the shape. Under different loads, small, quiet devices take up their share, not to fight the cable, but to keep the span smooth. On the cosmic bridge, gravity is the visible cable. The twin, if it exists, is a system of subtle countersprings that engage over long distances and long times. smoothing the span so that separation becomes the gentle default when the bridge is vast. How would you know such a partner is there? You look for agreements that are too tidy to be luck. Distant stellar candles fade more than gathering alone predicts. The ancient afterglow wears a pattern that speaks of a cosmos, not merely coasting. The large-scale web shows a preferred spacing, as if waves once passed through the early matter and left a fossil rhythm behind. Each clue can fit a simple, steady background pressure, yes, but they also leave room for a twin that is not constant. A partner whose tempo drifts across deep time. At the same time, you ask what is not allowed. The twin must be humble nearby. Planets trace orbits with exquisite reliability. Tides and timings leave very little room for extra mischief. If there is a counterpart to gravity, it declines to disturb the local dance. It reserves its influence for the widest reaches, where emptiness is generous and the sums over distance grow decisive. A good twin would be bashful in small rooms and bold in cathedral halls, gentle in neighborhoods, confident across continents of space, history teaches. Caution. Other placeholders have been invited in and then shown out. Ether once promised to carry light. It dissolved when the promise was not needed. Another proposal tried to mend the gap between what stars seem to weigh and how fast galaxies rotate. It explained some shapes and failed others. You do not treat any single idea as a savior. You keep many on a quiet shelf and let observation choose, grateful that the sky votes slowly and clearly when you give it time. What then might a twin feel like if you could sense it? Not a shove in your back, not a wind in your face. More like a decision the room has made to be slightly more spacious a moment from now than it is in this moment. In such a room, paths that would have crossed miss gently, and beams of light take a touch longer to meet. The effect is not dramatic, but a driftand drifts, given ages and expanses, change, destinies. A feather, falling forever, can still ring a bell. You test the thought with lenses made of gravity itself. When mass gathers, it bends passing light, making faint halos and arcs. If a twin is shaping the stage, the map of these bendings across the sky will carry its fingerprint. You read that map as a musician reads a score, tracing themes and counter-themes. The melody of pull is unmistakable. If a counter-melody of ease is present, it must blend, not blare. Some surveys hint at small tensions in the harmony, teeny disagreements about how fast the great web has grown. You do not overread them. You simply keep listening. There is a deeper reason to consider a twin beyond any single dataset. Balance makes systems stable. In the earliest moments, the universe may have swelled in a rush and then handed the baton to gentler expansion. Structures formed under pull while the background kept its slow invitation to widen. Too much pull, and the world would have recollapsed. Too much ease and structure would never have gathered. The life you know seems to have arisen between extremes. A partner to gravity fits that theme. A quiet symmetry of hearths and horizons. None of this empties gravity of its dignity. Stars still condense, planets still circle, apples still fall. The twin, if real, does not cancel the pull. It colors the horizon. It decides the fate of distances no cluster can hold. It is the mood of the background, the temperament of the void, the way absence votes when the universe takes a census. Where gravity builds neighborhoods, the partner sets how wide the night will open around them. You admit, too, that the twin may not be a separate character at all. It could be a different facet of gravity itself, behavior that appears only when you ask the fabric to describe distances beyond a certain scale. Small-scale rules can be relentless, and yet give way to new summaries. When you zoom out, a coastline looks jagged from the beach, smooth from a high flight. Neither view is wrong. Each is a truth appropriate to scale. Perhaps gravity's great-scale summary includes a built-in gentleness that shows itself only when distances become enormous. If you crave a picture, return to the loom. The weaver can tighten or relax the warp as the cloth grows. Near the beginning, tightness encourages threads to meet and knot. Later, a slight relaxation lets patterns open. The cloth does not forget its early texture. It layers it. Galaxies form, clusters bind, while the overall weave loosens just enough to keep the vastness from The twin, then, is not an intruder but the weaver's second hand, guiding the spacing of the pattern without unmaking the design. You carry this picture forward into feeling. There is mercy in a universe that holds both gathering and letting go. Bodies and stories need closeness to start, distance to grow, and a balanced measure of each to endure. The skies may be teaching the same lesson. Pull makes hearths. Ease makes horizons. Between them, trajectories become journeys instead of collisions, and a long road has room to be taken slowly. You ask what such a partner means for fate. If the twin remains steady, horizons will continue to draw inward in meaning, not in miles. More regions will lie beyond reach, not because light fails, but because distance grows too quickly for messages to cross. If the twin drifts with time, the pace of separation may change, and futures may carry gentle surprises. In either case, local families of stars keep their vows while the wider web thins. Home stays warm. The wilderness grows quiet. You also ask how to be honest with uncertainty. You do not need to decide which twin, which mechanism, which grammar of the fabric is correct before you can sleep. You can hold possibilities like smooth stones, turning them in soft light, letting their textures teach you patience. Science is not a shout, it is a listening that lasts. The best ideas learn to survive the next measurement, and the ones that remain will earn their names slowly. In the end, you keep the question simple and soft. Is there only pull, corrected by a calm that belongs to emptiness? Or is there also a rule, folded into the fabric, that behaves like a companion one, that gently prefers separation on the grandest scales? You do not need to answer tonight. You need only keep room for a twin in your understanding, and let the sky vote with its light, one faint photon at a time as you rest. A final intuition settles. Companions reveal themselves at boundaries. If a twin depravity exists, you will feel it not in the cradle of a solar system, but at the verge where sight fades and structures thin, the place where gatherings surrender to background and the background becomes the story. There, the push and pull resolve into a single, quiet direction of travel that feels less like a command and more like permission. You breathe with that direction and sense the horizon's character changing. It is no longer just a far edge. It is a moving frontier, receding as the room relaxes, inviting as it withdraws. The twin, real or not, has drawn your attention to that line, the limit beyond which messages cannot return in time. You become curious about the nature of an edge that retreats the more you follow. You close your eyes and let that curiosity rest without an answer. The partner you imagine may be an energy of emptiness, or a new habit of geometry, or simply another way to tell the same old story. Whatever its name, its kindness is the same. It gives distance room to be distance. It opens the map. It lets the choir of islands sing without pressing them into one cluster. It leaves space for silence to have meaning. You fall into that silence and feel the scales balance. Pull does not vanish. It takes care of homes. The twin, if it is there, takes care of horizons. Between them, the night finds its posture, gathered enough for warmth, open enough for wonder. You settle into that posture as if it were a bed made at the end of a long day. And in that drowsy calm, you admit a small truth. Even if the twin is only a way of speaking, it helps you listen better. It invites you to notice the long, slow lean of the universe, to respect the difference between local certainty and distant drift, to live with a question that stays friendly. Not every riddle must be solved before sleep. You turn once more to the edge of things and find it moving again. The more the room relaxes, the more the line of reach pulls away. The more it pulls away, the more your sense of future changes shape. The expansion is not a chase to win, but a tide to learn. So you breathe and let the tide pass through you. You do not ask it to hurry. You do not ask it to stop. You are content with the simple insight that push and pull may both belong to the same deep law, two manners of the same music, two hands of the same weaver. You are content to be small within it and still feel held. You drift, and the last question of the night arrives like a soft footstep in the hall. If the horizon keeps stepping back, what kind of future does it define, and what falls away beyond? You keep learning that edges in nature prefer to be tides. What seems like a fixed outline turns fluid the moment you look closely. The universe is generous with this lesson. The farther you gaze, the older the light becomes, and the line you hope to touch slides ahead. Horizon is not a wall. It is a distance defined by time. You live near it always, and it is always walking. The first comfort is to name what kind of limit you face. One horizon belongs to the past, the farthest light that has had time to reach you since the early glow broke free. It grows with every year because time offers more road. Another belongs to the future. No matter how long you wait, light emitted, now beyond a certain reach, will never arrive. That future limit exists only because the fabric itself widens. In a quiet, accelerating cosmos, space loosens faster as ages pass. Galaxies do not need motors to separate. The ruler that measures between them stretches. Crests of light are pulled apart while they travel, and messages that began sharp soften and redden. In the very far future, they slide to wavelengths no instrument can hold. Fading is not the star's fault. The path itself is becoming longer than any song can sustain. You are told that nothing outruns light. The statement remains true for motion through space, but not for the growth of space. Two marks on a balloon may sit still and still drift apart as the balloon swells. No mark breaks its local speed law. The map of separations expands faster than any runner. This is how the sky hides without moving, not by flight, but by yielding more between dot horizons. Is therefore gradual, not theatrical distant galaxies, not blink out, they dim by degrees. Their rhythms slow, their colors slide, and eventually their letters grow so wide that reading fails. You do not lose them to escape, you lose them to dilation. The long road steals contrast. Night becomes less crowded, not because lamps die, but because the hallway lengthens while you watch. Bound places ignore. This broadening the way a knot ignores the slackening of a rope it does not share. Gravity holds stars inside galaxies, inside groups. Where the bond is strong, expansion is outvoted. Our neighborhood remains one island while the sea pulls other shores away. Over long eras, islands merge into one larger city, and beyond it, the streets become deserts. It helps to picture your knowledge as a growing circle. The rim is bright with questions, and beyond the rim, the dark is honest, not hostile. The past horizon enlarges that circle. Old messages still arrive. The future horizon tightens another measure. What can ever be reached in principle? As acceleration continues, the region of possible conversation shrinks to what is bound. There is a kindness in admitting this. A limit is not an insult. It is guidance about where care can be effective. You cannot call back a galaxy once the channel outpaces light. You can keep company with your neighbors while you have them. You can listen to the oldest glow while it still hums within range. The cosmos asks for local devotion and global humility at once. The microwave afterglow remembers when everything was close. It bathes you with an almost uniform warmth, mottled by tiny ripples that seeded every future structure. As space keeps relaxing, that warmth reddens beyond practical hearing. The common room cools. The hush between islands deepens. The background will not vanish. It will simply move to a page of the spectrum no ear can turn. A moving horizon also loosens your grip on now. Light needs time to cross. While it travels, the road grows. What you call the current state of a very distant place is not a knowable thing. You receive only what was, and the future at that address may be forever silent to you. This is not cruelty. It is a gentle correction to the instinct that the present must be shared. You may hear of a sphere defined by today's rate of expansion, where recessions reach the speed of light. It is a useful milepost, but not the deepest boundary. Light, sent from within, can still arrive if it had a head start. Light sent from beyond may yet appear if the tempo slows. The true future horizon is stricter, a movable line that separates the ever-reachable from the forever beyond. In a universe that keeps its late-time push, that horizon tends toward a fixed scale, even as distances elsewhere continue to swell. New acquaintances grow rare. Old companions fade past reply. What remains is the island you inhabit. The community gravity protects from the general drift. Far ahead, your sky will hold one grand city of merged stars, the archive of a broader story no longer visible. None of this empties meaning. It condenses it. The fewer conversations possible, the more each one matters. You prize the signals that still fit your receivers, the shared timings, the cooperative measurements that turn faint whispers into reliable knowledge. Mapping the widening is not an act of control. It is a practice of belonging. With each survey, you tune your expectations to the size and patience of reality. The horizon's cousin, near a collapsed star, teaches by contrast. Around such a mass, the point of no return surrounds a center like a tight collar. In the large, accelerating cosmos, the limit has no center to encircle. It wraps each observer, marking the farthest future that can still send a greeting. Both are set by geometry, not by doors or guards. Both are invitations to modesty. Because the edge keeps moving, archives become a gentle duty. Keep the records that later eyes may lack. Write how you weighed the sky, how you timed the standard candles, how you listened for the slight deepening of silence between clusters. Share the methods, not only the answers. When the wider choir falls below the range of hearing, method will be the song that remains. There is a human mirror here. Friendships too are bounded by chance, distance, and time. Some can be kept, some must be remembered. The lesson of the horizon is not despair, but precision. Pour presence where it can be received. Let go without bitterness where no path exists. The sky models this with absolute calm. It does not beg what cannot be, and it embraces what can. If you worry that expansion wastes energy, rest in a subtler ledger. What dims as photons stretch reappears as longer rhythm and changed geometry. Conservation lives locally, where clocks and rulers are honest, while the grand fabric keeps different books. You do not need a hidden vault to balance the night. You need a willingness to let intuition learn new manners. From any balcony, you see the same signature. The farther a beacon, the faster it recedes. This pattern identifies no throne. Move to another balcony, and the law stays the same. The appearance of centrality is a kindness the universe extends equally. It lets every shore feel like the middle, and in doing so, quietly denies that any shore is crowned. Democracy of distance, written as a lullaby. What, then, happens when you can no longer see the others? Physics continues. Stars are born and fade inside your island. Planets circle. Questions bloom and rest. Meaning narrows its theater and grows thicker there. A smaller stage does not demand smaller care. It asks for more attentive light, placed where eyes remain, placed with the tenderness that scarcity teaches. You keep practicing. 2 movements, reach and release. Reach, to learn while learning is possible. Release, to accept the lines drawn by the accelerating weave. Neither movement is resignation. Together they are balance. They let curiosity and rest alternate like breath. They fit a creature who lives, briefly inside a fabric that will outlast every map and still be learning how to expand. At last, you return to the original image, edges that are tides. The cosmic horizon is a shore drawn by the pace of space itself. It slips as you approach. It teaches you to trade possession for participation, grasping for listening. The sea does not stop for your feet. It welcomes your attention and gives you scale. You can still take bearings while the shoreline slides. Standard candles time their fading, tracing distance. Frozen ripples in the spacing of galaxies act as quiet yardsticks, repeating a preferred step across the deep. Another caution warms the thought. The rate at which the fabric loosens is not fixed by wish, but by content. If the hidden pressure that drives the late time widening were to change its mood, horizons would answer. A slower pace would invite more meetings. A quicker one would hurry the farewells. For now, the best reading is that the push continues gently. The observable grows while the reachable shrinks, to truths that sound like opponents, but are companions. The past keeps offering new pages as ancient light finally arrives. The future withdraws some addresses from the mailing list. You live at the crossing of these motions, receiving more of what was while letting go of what will never be yours to hold. It is an honest geometry of hope and acceptance. Think of lighthouses on a foggy coast. As the mist thickens, more beacons slide into grey. The cliff does not move. The seeing changes. So it is with expansion. The cliffs of those distant cities remain, but the fog between grows. What fades from vision is not denied existence. It is simply released from the promise of conversation with you. Because horizons move, the habit of care grows practical. Share catalogues widely. Build archives that explain instruments as well as results. Leave maps annotated with doubt as well as confidence, so that later readers can tell which lines were traced lightly. When the choir quiets and the gallery empties, The notes about listening will help those who remain keep time with what is still near. Sleep with that scale beside you. The sky will keep widening. The elders of your island will keep their tools clean. The archives will keep their quiet pages. Far away, most fires will pass beyond correspondence, and the night will turn minimalist. Closer in, kindness will still be practical. You are not required to hold the whole. You are invited to keep a faithful portion. You can trim the lamp, note the tide, and hum with the breathing fabric. The horizon that always moves is not a threat. It is a rhythm. Let it pace your listening, and let your listening be the gift you can still send before the water pulls one measure farther, so gently. You begin with a gentle doubt, the kind that keeps science honest. Perhaps the thing you named is not a thing at all. Perhaps the outward push you inferred is a mirage born from distance. From assumptions stacked like ladders to reach a sky that keeps rising. You do not accuse the sky. You do not accuse the tools. You ask a softer question instead. If the effect is real, could the cause be something other than a new substance in the dark? You hold that question like a smooth stone, turning it slowly, listening to its cool weight. Start with the candles you trusted, the bright, brief endings of certain stars that shine with a nearly dependable brilliance. They were your far hallway. Bulbs, familiar wattage, great distance. Compare true brightness with apparent, and distance reveals itself. But even faithful bulbs have context. Dust can redden light without confession. Environments can mature candles in ways that nudge their glow. Selection can favor the loudest peaks and miss the softest. If any of this leans the numbers, what looks like acceleration might be the echo of circumstance. You test these worries with patience. Colors betray hidden dust. The slow stretching of each light curve reveals a universe that has stretched during the journey. Nearby and faraway samples are cross-calibrated so population quirks are tamed. The candles still sing the same tune. Farther looks fainter than a coasting cosmos would allow. So you invite other choirs. In the web of galaxies there lingers a fossil ring, a preferred spacing set when the young universe rang like a drum. Measured at many depths, the size of that ring becomes a second ruler. It too says that distance has grown more than gravity's gathering alone would permit. Then you ask the oldest light of all, the afterglow that covers the entire sky, to speak. Its delicate speckle says what ingredients filled the young universe and how quickly the first minutes passed. Evolve that pattern forward. Matter pulls, radiation thins, structures grow, and the present matches only if a gentle, persistent widening is added to the score. 3 testimonies, gathered by different senses, converge on one story. Space has been adding space faster than a simple pull would predict. But a mirage can be made by terrain as easily as by weather. What if you inhabit a large, quiet valley? In the cosmic quilt, light leaving busier districts and passing through your broad hollow could be stretched and delayed in ways that mimic a global quickening. Lumpiness can imitate trend. You picture a loaf with tunnels and bubbles and ask whether the tunnels could fool a careful baker into thinking the whole loaf is rising faster than it is. The answer so far is modest. Structure matters, yes, but not enough to trade acceleration for coincidence. Texture adds ripples to the reading, not a new destiny. Perhaps the misunderstanding is not in the scene, but in the script. The pull you call gravity is trustworthy nearby. Yet rules sometimes change their voice at new scales. What if the same geometry that gathers also relaxes when distances become oceanic? Not a rebellion, only a second mood. Near masses, bowls remain bowls. Far away, the stage could be slightly less eager to collect. Such a change would be bashful in small rooms and confident in cathedral halls. The very pattern your measurements seem to require. You speak of this possibility with care, because nearby gravity is mercilessly accurate. Planets keep time like metronomes, falling bodies agree to many decimal places. Any revision must leave the neighborhood untouched and reveal itself only where emptiness dominates. New grammars of the fabric make forecasts. How light should bend around great gatherings. How the cosmic web should grow. How the old afterglow should look if the rules ease at long range. Some versions stumble. Others survive to be tested. Again, none yet wears a crown everyone accepts, and so the door stays open. There is humility in the machinery of inference. Distance is an answer at the end of a chain of choices. Calibrations built from nearer rungs. Priors that gently lean the scales. Maps stitched from different colors of light, each with its own way of being fooled. A small bias repeated at many steps can grow into a tilt. So you check the ladder rung by rung. You change the priors and watch whether the conclusion drifts. You cross-match with methods that share no assumptions. The widening remains. Stranger options wait on the quiet shelf. Maybe a constant you treat as fixed is only very nearly so, drifting so slowly that only the full age of the sky can confess it. A shift that tiny would imprint itself on spectra and on the clockwork of atoms, and thus on your rulers, masquerading as a change in pace. Maybe the vacuum's level is not perfectly level, but a surface that rolls with the patience of mountains flat to a lifetime, sloped to 1 billion years. Maybe the degrees of freedom you count are not the only ones, but fabric uses. Maybe some hidden motions lend the stage a habit of widening without ever being felt as a shove. If the force is not real, why does the push look so consistent? That is the knot that will not untie easily. Independent lines of evidence, far. Candles, the fossil ring in the galaxy web, the baby picture of the afterglow, the subtle shearing of distant shapes by gravity's lens, all point the same way. Agreement does not guarantee truth, but truth loves agreement. When different instruments playing different melodies resolve to the same chord, you pay attention and you keep listening for discord that refuses to fade. So perhaps force is simply the wrong word. Perhaps nothing is pushing. Perhaps expansion belongs to the definition of the stage, the way breath belongs to a living chest. When you say the cosmos accelerates, you might be describing not a shove but a preference of the fabric, a quiet leaning that needs no new actor, only a new sentence. Words like energy are bridges in such places. Names you use while deciding whether the habit you see should be thought of as stuff or as rule. The bridge helps you cross without pretending the far bank is already home. Still, you test everything that could undo the illusion. You look for dust that reddens, cleverly, for subtle ways the candles might have evolved, for gentle bends in what you took to be straight lines. You vary the curvature of the whole. Ask the data whether space might be slightly open or slightly closed, and see how that alters the fit. You measure how quickly the scaffolding of clusters has grown. Each exercise narrows the room in which a pure misunderstanding could live. The room is not empty, but it is smaller than it was. Along the way, you accept that not all puzzles evaporate with more data. Some reside in the frame itself. When the map omits a peninsula, surveying harder only traces its absence more precisely. To escape that loop, you change the projection. You learn to rename quantities, to ask questions that fit the phenomenon, rather than forcing the phenomenon to fit your favorite questions. Often the act of choosing different axes turns a paradox into a pattern you can live with. If the force is not real, very little about tomorrow changes. The universe still widens. Horizons still retreat in meaning, not in miles. Bound families of stars keep their vows, and local warmth remains. What changes is the shade of your explanation. Instead of adding a new ingredient, you would revise the grammar, the way you narrate how distance counts itself. Either story yields the same forecast for those who stay close to home. A long, slow, graceful future, lit more by neighbors than by strangers. You return to your three great witnesses and thank them for their honesty. They do not tell you the cause, they tell you which causes are plausible. The mirage, if it is a mirage, is disciplined. It survives decades of scrutiny, many instruments, many assumptions. That discipline becomes part of what is true. A placeholder can still be a lantern. A mirage can still lead you toward real water, even if the shimmer dissolves when you arrive at the spring. Names can change while the lesson they carried stays. In the end, you hold two possibilities without hurry. In one hand, there is a steady, space-filling pressure that belongs to emptiness itself. In the other, there is no new pressure at all. Only geometry speaking in a second voice when asked a question at the grandest scale. In both hands, distant things drift farther, and the future grows quieter as more of the choir slips beyond audition. Either way, the music slows. Either way, the breath continues. And you are carried by it whether or not you can name the source. So what, then, is being not real? Perhaps only this: the name you gave the preference may fade, while the preference remains. You can trade a substance for a sentence, an entity for a habit, without losing the lesson. The lesson is that on the widest stage, separation grows as surely as embers cool. The night will not reverse into noon. And yet, none of this makes the world less kind. It gives your questions better edges, and your sleep a steadier pillow. You allow the widening to be what it is, while the story about it ripens. You close with a thought that feels like a vow. Keep measuring kindly. Keep imagining cautiously. Let the sky tighten the circle of good explanations. If a better sentence appears, you will know it by its grace. It will hold more facts with fewer assumptions, and the small tensions that remain will feel less like cracks and more like paths. Whether the force is real or not, the widening is. The tide does not ask your permission. It simply, patiently, becomes. And still, something pushes. Whether that something is a pressure you could bottle, or a preference you can only name. Its effect is real in the arithmetic of distance. Space keeps adding space between far things. The breath, once noticed, does not unnotice. In the morning, your instruments will wake and take their places. The universe will do what it has always done. Make room for more room and more room. For wonder, you rest your questions like tools laid carefully on a bench. If the force is not real, perhaps the urge to widen is simply the way the fabric ages, a ripening of emptiness, a soft settling into a shape that favors openness. Perhaps cause is the wrong kind of word for a property so basic. You do not need to decide tonight. You need only let the widening carry you as it carries galaxies, slow enough for sleep, sure enough for trust. You rest in the thought that expansion is a kind of breathing, not a gasp, not a heave, but a long exhale that never finishes. Distance. grows the way dusk grows across a field, gently and evenly, with no hurry and no edge. You feel only a slow leaning outward, like the loosened weave of a fabric that has decided to relax. The universe does not sprint, it drifts, and the drift keeps time as the fabric loosens. The nearby stays loyal for a while. Gravity ties what it can tie. Stars cling to their cities. Cities drift within their groups. Groups surrender to broader flows. What is not firmly bound slides apart. Distant lights dim, their notes stretched into lower tones until the melody becomes a hum. Then a whisper, then a silence, only instruments. Can name, it is not disappearance. It is conversation that distance has outgrown, star-making slows. Gas is spent, warmed, or locked away. The bright nurseries thin, and the fireworks of youth give way to steadier lamps. Galaxies merge, growing rounder and quieter, turning many small stories into one long chapter. In time, even that chapter trails off, its sentences ending in ellipses. The rate is not sudden. It is the patience of ages arranging themselves into calm. The background warmth that once told you the whole was close keeps cooling. Its tone slides to longer and longer waves, falling beyond any ear, beyond the patient cups that listen to the sky. There is nothing wrong with the song. The hall has widened while the note held. What began as a bright choir becomes a single, pure tone, and then a tone so stretched you register it more as hush than as sound. Local life continues. Stars remain, though their births grow rare. They live, they age, and they send their last envelopes of light. Some die gently, shedding shells that glow like fading embers. Some end in a sudden shout, forging heavier elements in the brief furnace of goodbye. Their gifts drift into space, but fewer hands remain to receive them. The next generation is thinner. The next after that is thinner still. The nursery closes not with a slam, but with a door left ajar in a house gone quiet. What endures are the remnants. There are cinders that do not burn, but still hold heat. There are dense hearts that remember collapse as a posture, not a moment. At many centers, gravity keeps the last archives, dark and patient, feeding when they can. Around them, orbits settle or scatter. Encounters trade energy like coins. Some travelers flung outward, others falling inward, each exchange writing a calmer ledger. On scales where the cosmic loosening wins, islands grow lonelier. The far coasts of the map sink into a fog the eye cannot pierce. Our island becomes its own universe for practical purposes, a small commonwealth of stars bound by shared gravity and shared past. Far beyond, other islands still exist, but there, mail no longer arrives. It is not that we forget them, it is that memory has no new letters to answer. The long future teaches patience. Faint, cool stars take the stage, burning slowly for trillions of years. Their light is a vow spoken softly. Worlds, if they remain, circle in long winters and modest springs. Chemistry grows frugal. The drama of youth has passed, and what is left is endurance, a quiet craft that refines what can be refined and saves what can be saved. Even time seems to learn economy, yet the breath continues. The measure that tells distance how to behave keeps easing its grip, the way a steady hand relaxes as sleep deepens. The horizon around any observer becomes more personal, like a lamp in fog. Beyond a certain reach, the universe keeps its counsel. Within that reach, things still meet, still orbit, still exchange. Inside, the last theaters stay lit. Outside, The balcony grows dark. Long after the bright epoch closes, the cinders cool. The white remnants fade to grey, then to black by any ordinary standard, radiating their hoarded heat into a night more and more generous with emptiness. The dense remnants persist, holding to their gravity like a vow. If nature allows, even the most stubborn particles may one day yield, but that rumor belongs to a chapter that keeps its covers closed. For now, what matters is the steady cooling, the settling of accounts, the long arithmetic of loss that becomes balance. The darkest hearts rule the traffic of what survives. They do not burn, they curve. Their power is not a blaze, but a geometry. They collect, merge, and ring like struck bells when they meet, sending ripples into the fabric that carry energy outward. In waves too gentle to warm your skin and yet real enough to rewrite the diagrams. Each ring down is a farewell note, traveling forever. Though the forever keeps stretching dot around them, the few remaining stars die one by one. The record of the cosmos shifts from light to gravity's braille. Events are felt in the tug, in the wave, in the slow migration of orbits, rather than seen. Seeing adapts, learning to read faint signatures where brightness once spoke plainly. Observers, if any exist, become archivists of motion more than color. The night is not empty of stories. It is simply stingier, with ink. Expansion keeps writing. Smaller handwriting between larger letters. The scale on which islands can talk keeps shrinking toward the local. In the deep future, the last great merge completes. Our own island is likely a single round city centered on a deep well of gravity. Around that well, cold embers, dark planets, and quiet dust move like patient moths around an unlit lamp. The map becomes simple, not because there is little to know, but because the actors have accepted their roles completely. Time stretches thin, not as a trick, but as a feeling that events space themselves farther apart. You wait longer between things that happen. Waiting becomes a practice, almost a virtue. The rare spark earns reverence, an occasional merger, a rare flare when matter finds a last chance to heat. Like snow in a desert, each flake receives a name, a witness, a careful entry in a record that may exist only as a trace of altered motion. The long exhale continues toward a limit, where breath becomes indistinguishable from stillness. In the simplest reading, a universe with a steady push approaches a calm that is not empty but unchanging in large character. There is a horizon for every observer, a private coastline beyond which news cannot arrive. Heat is low and even. Fluctuations remain, as they always do, small and random, without a preferred direction and without a planned crescendo. The orchestra stays tuned. The score slows to whole notes held across horizons. What then endures? Structure endures where? It is most stubborn in deep wells and compact knots, and in the grammar of law itself. The rules that carried you from fire to fog to clarity remain. Energy is tallied exactly in small places, even if the large book is written in a script that confounds common sense. Momentum keeps its promises, cause mines its own horizons. Symmetry still hums under the surface. Like a bass note, you feel more than hear. Law is a kind of kindness, predictable, patient, available. Meaning endures too, though it changes outfit. In a loud universe, meaning rushes from spectacle to spectacle. In a quiet one, it walks, it sits, it keeps company, it learns to pronounce the names of small things with care. The long future invites a morality of attention. Clean instruments, honest ledgers, shared methods, tender archives. When light grows scarce, clarity dazzles. When events slow, fidelity matters more, not less. You may ask whether this is death. The word is strong and short. The reality is long and light. What happens is not an ending in the human sense. It is becoming. Processes that once raced now stroll. Energies that once shouted now hum. The universe ages into its own patience, like a mind that has found its pace. If grief appears anywhere, it is a kind that honors what has been made possible by the long room that expansion created. One day, even the darkest wells may loosen their hold, if whispers about slow leaking prove true. If so, the last architecture returns itself to the field it shaped, and the field carries the memory as pattern rather than as object. If not, the dark wells remain as monuments, cold and unlit, reminding the night of the pressures it once survived. Either way, the breath does not reverse. The room does not shrink. The tide does not return to a single wave. It only grows shallower, and wider and quieter. The wonder that stays with you is not the catalogue of stages, but the softness of the arc. The story is not a cliff. It is a slope that shallows. It is a breath stretched across uncountable hours. It is a promise kept by equations that ask for calm. It invites you to change your measure of meaning from noise and urgency to poise and endurance. It asks whether you can be content with a universe that grows less theatrical and more sincere. This sincerity shows in the way scale separates. Local keeps its business, global keeps its drift. Forces that rule atoms remain loyal inside atoms, whatever the sky does. Gravity minds the choreography of what is big and slow. The gentle pressure of emptiness minds the stage directions for the very large. No one steals anyone else's lines. The play becomes minimalist, but the roles are crisp. There is pleasure in that clarity for a mind that loves order without losing awe, and yet a mystery endures, bright as ever. Why is there a breath at all? Why do the rules sit at values that permit a slow, habitable arc? Why does emptiness push instead of merely standing aside? The idea of many worlds offers a context. Selection offers another. But context and selection are answers about why you are able to ask, not why there is asking to be done. The root remains covered, like a spring that feeds a lake from a seam no hand can reach. Under skies, care changes shape. You place light. Where eyes remain, share methods, label doubt, and keep ledgers. When spectacle fades, responsibility sharpens, and precision becomes a form of love. Perhaps that root is not a fact to be captured, but a relationship to be kept. The bond between mind and world, between question and law, persists even as the theatre simplifies. Wonder does not depend on busy skies. It depends on attention. Attention is portable. It can survive thin light and slow events. It can make meaning from a single tick in a long hour. It can notice a whisper and call it sufficient dot. So no, this is not a funeral. It is a widening room with fewer voices, and you learning how to listen better. It is a shift in key from anthem to lullaby. It is chance giving way to patience as the main composer of novelty. It is a house where the lights are turned low, and the windows are left open to a night that will never end, and where the cool air does not chill you. It teaches your lungs how to breathe slowly. What breathes in the dark is not lungs. It is law and chance and geometry and the old, unhurried push of emptiness. It is the rhythm of relations playing on, even when most instruments have been put away. It is the edge of warmth sliding outward without landing anywhere. It is the universe itself keeping its promise to continue, not with drama, but with devotion. To be part of that is not to be erased. It is to belong to the longest, gentlest tide. When you close your eyes, the arc does not shorten. The breath does not pause. The night does not grow cruel because you turned inward. It remains what it is: wide, patient, generous with time, exact in law, and honest about limits. That honesty is calming. It makes room for sleep. It assures you that mystery will be there when you wake, unchanged and yet ready for a new angle. Of light, let the last image be simple: a lantern carried through a vast hall. With each step, the light reaches a little way, and that is enough. The hall is bigger than the circle, but the circle is not small. It is exactly the size needed to keep walking. The breath that never ends moves around you, through you, and beyond you. You do not need to hold it. You need only to breathe with it, gently, until both the lantern and the hall feel like home.